The judge give you a voluntary departure, and you can say, Your Honor, I would like to come back and go to school, and he can grant you that if you want to.
Does it differ between the states? I mean, between the state to another state?
The case law that here for Texas, we are in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, very conservative court, but there's been a lot of hundreds of asylum cases from around the world. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword here. On the one hand, it's conservative circuit. It's not liberal like California and San Francisco, the Ninth Circuit. So it's two extremes. The Ninth Circuit, they say it's the most liberal when it comes down to asylum and granting immigrant rights. And the Fifth Circuit is the other spectrum, is a little bit more conservative. The good thing though about the Fifth Circuit is that there's been so many cases from around the world. There's so much case law. People from all over the world, I think Texas gets about, I would say that 60% of all credible fears come through Texas. Not just through El Paso, but through all of Texas. So 60% of people that come from around the world and ask for asylum come through Texas. So what does that mean for you guys? That the case law has been developed. The arguments are there. You're not walking in unknown territory. With the Fifth Circuit, at least we know what the expectations are. Whereas in other, like say New Mexico, the 10th Circuit, they're kind of, like the 10th Circuit would cover New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Utah. And so those are not border states. So the people that seek asylum are smaller in numbers. So the judges don't have the experience to litigate some of those cases. Whereas in Texas, we got the Houston Asylum Office, we got the borders, the Valley of Texas. And so there's been people, every day here in El Paso, you'll be surprised, people come from Iran, from Iraq, from Russia, they come from Africa, they come from China, North Korea. Every day people come and ask for asylum. And so that's the difference, is that, but there is a difference, and there are some judges in different states that are, I guess, they are a little bit more friendlier to immigrants, like New York, than Texas. Except that it depends what country you come from. I could say for a fact that in Texas, they don't like Mexican asylum cases. But if you're from Africa, they look at those more favorable, from our experience. And they might look, the country where you guys are from, Libya, they might look at it more favorably. And for Mexico, the reason is because it's just so close to the border that they're scared that, half of Mexico is going to come over here. So they tend to be tougher on those cases. So it does matter. It's not really discrimination, but it just matters what's happening in your country and the politics of your country do come into play with the asylum cases. Yes.
Is there a deadline to apply for asylum? Is there
a deadline? Well, the deadline is a year once you touch the U.S. So you'll have a year. As soon as you come to the U.S., you only have 1 year. And if you don't, then there's a bar. And the exception to that is if there's been changed circumstances in your country. For instance, in Libya, I would argue, and I think it's a legitimate argument, that the civil war that broke out, and Gaddafi, and killing civilians, no one never thought that was going to happen. No one thought that there was going to be an uprising and people were going to be fighting. No one foresaw that. So to me, that's a changed circumstances that it's up to the asylum office that they could say we're not gonna use the bar against you, but you have to argue it. You have to put it in. You have to tell them if you've been here more than a year. So there is a deadline. That's 1 year that you have.
How long did it take to get the
asylum?
Yeah,
it depends. I mean, to put the application together. For an affirmative case, it could take a couple of months because it's not something that you just fill it out and send it in. You have to take your time. You have to fill out the application completely. You have to do a statement of why you fear, persecution, by whom and why, and you make some legal arguments, and it's like a package, and then you send it. You send it to the asylum office, and then they send it to Houston, and they process it. They send you to get fingerprints, and then they give you an interview. They actually come here in person, and they interview here in El Paso at the immigration office. And that could take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to 8 months. It just depends. The last one that I did for affirmative, it's an African case from Cameroon. We filed the application in December, and I believe in February we had interview, and then 2 weeks later, we had the decision, and they gave him the asylum.
I mean, if you apply for refugee, for example, in Canada, and then you apply for asylum here, but you get the approval from refugee in Canada before you get the answer. Can you leave the
There are some third-party agreements, but I'm going to have to look, because I know that there was a new case that came out from the International Court, where there's a third-party agreement with the United States and Canada. And basically what the agreement says is this: any person who crosses the U.S. and goes to Canada to ask for asylum, Canada must deny the asylum and send them back to the U.S. first. You have to first ask for asylum inside the United States, and then if you get turned down, then you have to go back to your country, and then from there, fly into Canada and ask for asylum. And that's a third-party agreement. I know it doesn't make sense, but that's what the third-party agreement says. And so, but there's a new case recently that I haven't read yet, where the International Court said that Canada was violating international law because they were saying that how can you send people back to the country? If they're asking for asylum, you don't supposed to send them back because they're getting persecuted. So the International Court says, we're going to fine Canada, a certain amount of money for violating this other international law that you guys signed onto with the United Nations. And in some case, I haven't read it in detail, but that's how it works. So like, let's just say someone from Mexico comes to the U.S., then drives to Canada and says, I want asylum. They'll deny it. You can't do that. Why? Because there's a third-party agreement that says, no, first you go to the U.S. Since you crossed U.S. territory, you ask for asylum in the U.S. first. Then if you get denied, you can go to Canada. So, but the other way to do it is if you were Mexican, you could fly from Mexico directly to Canada. That's okay. But once you touch the U.S., then there's all these third-party agreements. So what you're asking me, I don't think you can do it unless I'm going to go back and look at that case and see what it says. But as far as I know right now, you can't do it. You have to do it first here, because you're here, and then if you get turned down, then you can seek other countries. The third-party agreements is basically the European Union, Canada, Switzerland, Holland, all those countries, Germany, they all have pacts with each other on international law and on asylum law. And so if you come to the U.S. and you're an asylum seeker, you have to ask for asylum here. Once you go to Canada, and Canada's going to ask you, if you get here, I came here in a car. And to go to the U.S., yes, they're going to say, okay, your asylum's going to be denied. You have to go back to the U.S. and ask for asylum. Get denied, and then before you can come. I don't know why they have those agreements, but that's what. And now there's a case though that came out that Canada was wrong because they were telling people to go back to their countries, and that is illegal because under the next topic we were going to talk about, if you can show the slide, the Convention Against Torture is an international law that I'm going to talk about right now. And under the Convention Against Torture, it says that anyone that can prove that you have persecution by the government. Now this is different from asylum. And this is different from withholding or removal. Because I told you, asylum is race, nationality, religion, political opinion, social. Under the Convention Against Torture, you don't have to show none of that. All you have to show is that you're being persecuted by the government. It doesn't have to be on your race, or your nationality, or your religion, or your political, or your social. It doesn't matter anymore. You have to show that it's a government force, or it's by a group that the government can control,